So yeah, my history with video games. Um, so I'm 41 now. I was born in 79, and I'm the youngest of four kids. My siblings were 10 and a half to 15 years older than me. So the first video game system I ever remember playing is the Atari 2600, which was already in the house because of my older siblings. I don't know when they gotten it, but all I know is by the early 80s at some point when I was old enough, I discovered it and wanted to play it, and they let me play it. I don't remember what game exactly. I don't remember if it was like Pong or Pac-Man or something like that. I just remember playing it, and I wasn't super enamored by it at the time. It was fun, but it didn't thrill me that much. Maybe I was too young as well. I don't know. It didn't do much for me, like the graphics and everything. And then I did play video games here or there in the following years, mostly arcade games at restaurants, bowling alleys, amusement parks, things like that. And again, like Pac-Man or Centipede or stuff like that. Nothing too crazy. But the first time I really got excited about video games, as far as I remember, was when I went to a buddy's house for a Cub Scout meeting. We had moved at some point to a different house, and at this new house I had 3 friends who lived across the street from me, who I made friends with, and then there was some other boys down the street, down the block from me, that I made friends with as well. And one of the boys down the block, he was in the same Cub Scout troop as me, and we went to his house to have a Cub Scout meeting one night, and this was the 80s. So this was, the dads all basically got together and were drinking beers and stuff, and us boys were running around the house doing whatever. I remember Terminator being on TV, and I'd never seen it before because I wasn't allowed to watch rated R movies or anything. So I was enamored by it. We didn't watch the whole movie, but I saw some scenes and stuff, and I was enamored by it. Yeah, but in the other room, in the corner, he had this little TV set up, probably like a 13-inch TV, and a Nintendo, an NES system. And I'd never seen one before. I'd never heard of a Nintendo before. This was all new to me. And the game Kung Fu was on it. And they were playing, some of the kids were playing it, and I was like, whoa, what is this? I'd never seen a video game with graphics like that. And if you've ever played the game Kung Fu for the NES, you know that the graphics are next to nothing. It's 8-bit pixelized, glory kind of thing. But it's, back then it was amazing compared to what I had been seeing on home consoles, which was only the Atari 2600 at the time. So I was blown away by it, and I played a little bit of it, and I was like, I want one of these. I got to get one of these. So back then when I was a kid, I was a little spoiled around Christmas time or birthday, I think being the 4th kid by, almost 11 years. And my parents being a little older and more established and stuff. So I kind of used my birthdays and Christmases to get big gifts. And so one year for my birthday, I ended up getting an NES. I asked for an NES, and I got an NES, and I had wanted the game Kung Fu as well. And my sister, that's 10 and a half years older than me, she was working at a daycare center at the time, and she got me Kung Fu. And I remember her telling me, it was $25, and I remember her telling me, well, I hope you like it, because it was a whole day's wages for me. I was like, whoa, okay, that's crazy. I didn't know how much video games cost at the time, really. I mean, I was still just getting into it. But I was like, yeah, I love this game. I played it at my friend's house and blah, blah, blah. And I did. I loved it. And of course, the Nintendo came with, it was the one that came with the gun and everything. So it came with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt as well. So those were my first 3 games. And I was blown away by it. And that was my beginning, my real beginning with video games. And my best friends that lived across the street from me, the 2 younger ones were the ones I hung out with all the time. And they would come over and play my Nintendo with me, and then eventually they got a Nintendo too, and that was just the beginning of that. And then we would go out to, like I said, bowling alleys and things like that, and we would, the video games, the arcade games started to get better and better too, Double Dragon, Bad Dudes, I don't even remember all the games back then. I remember the game Narc, where you're like a narcotics cop or something running around killing like drug dealers and stuff. It's kind of a crazy game. But yeah, it was the 80s were pretty cool like that. They really were. And so I mean, to make a video game like that and kids play it, and adults at the time really, like, they weren't paying attention to video games, so they really had no idea what was going on or what was in these games. For the most part, they were just kind of like, oh, kids are playing video games. Video games are like a thing for kids back then. They weren't like they are now, where like adults play them and everything. So yeah, that was really my first, like, really into like a home console system where I really got into it. And I mean, we really got into it. We rented all kinds of games from like the local video store, and you know, bought some games here or there. Not many though, because we didn't have any money, you know, a lot, and games were still pretty expensive back then. So we mostly rented them, but you know, we'd get them for birthdays or Christmas or things here and there. And it wasn't maybe more than 2 or 3 years later, because this was around, I think, 86 or 87, I think it was, that I got the NES. So it was, I think it was around 87. So then it was like a couple of years later or whatever, the Sega Genesis was coming out, and I was blown away by this thing. I was like, oh my God, 16-bit graphics and stereo sound and all this. Like, it was crazy. Seeing like Altered Beast and stuff on there, it was like, whoa, look at this thing. And but also the TurboGrafx 16 was out as well, the NEC TurboGrafx 16, and that was also a really cool system with like Bonk's Adventure and stuff. And the cool thing about that system was that the games came on these little cards, which I thought was really cool at the time, like these super thin, like almost like credit card size cards that like the games were on. I was like, how do they do that? Especially with like Nintendo having these like almost VHS size cartridges, and then the Genesis had smaller cartridges, but it was still, I mean, a lot bigger and thicker than the NEC cards. And then the NEC, or the TurboGrafx 16 also had the portable system, and it was really expensive, but you could take the same games out of the home console and put them in the portable, and it had a color screen and everything. It was like, whoa. Like, everybody was going crazy over the Game Boy at the time, but that was the real system that was like, blow your mind kind of cool. Game Boy was a lot cheaper though. That's why it sold so well. But yeah, that I remember, I think it was called the TurboGrafx 16 Express, but it was a very cool system. And I rented one once and I played it, and I thought it was really cool because I rented that and a Genesis, trying to decide which one I wanted to ask for Christmas or whatever, and I ended up going with the Genesis. I think because it was cheaper and there were some games on it that looked more appealing to me at the time. Even though the first time I had rented a Genesis, I had to take it back because I couldn't get it to work. I ended up putting the cartridge in the top of the system, but I didn't push it in all the way. I was trying to be delicate with it and not break it, so I didn't like jam it in or anything, because it was a rented system, and I couldn't like get it to turn on. So we ended up returning it, and that's when I rented the TurboGrafx 16 instead. But I asked for the Genesis anyway because I thought, well, maybe that was just a faulty Genesis. And when I got the Genesis, I had the same problem at first. I couldn't turn it on, and it was like problematic because I was like, Christmas morning, I was like, it doesn't work. But eventually, like within like an hour or so, I figured out I had to push it in more, and that's when it actually started working. And I was like, oh wow, I'm an idiot, you know, and I didn't realize that. I was just trying to be too delicate with it. So yeah, that was the start of the 16-bit era, and that was pretty cool. And then a couple years later, a year later or something like that, the Super Nintendo came out, and that was the one that, like, I actually ended up liking the Super Nintendo more than the Genesis. Some people were the other way around, but for me, I just thought the SNES had better graphics and just seemed like it sounded better, looked better, all that. So yeah, that was kind of the beginning of that era. And then, but I did like certain things about the Genesis. I rented a Sega CD. I couldn't afford a Sega CD, and I couldn't get one for Christmas or my birthday or whatever, for whatever reason. I don't remember why, but I rented a Sega CD at one point, the ones that went underneath the Genesis, like not the ones that went on the side. Those were like a later revision. So this one had like the slot loading, like, you know, tray and all that stuff, and it was pretty cool. I was really impressed by the Sega CD, and I rented like the game, like a couple of games for it, a few games for it, like Night Trap was my favorite. And then I think I also rented like Sewer Shark, stuff like that. And that's the direction I thought video games would be going in, is I thought they would become more like video, like actual video, because a couple of those games, like I said, Night Trap and Sewer Shark, they were video games. And then there were some other games that were out at the arcade at the time. Like I remember, I forget what it was called, but it was like this cowboy game or something where you shoot these cowboys or something, and it was also used real video. So that's the direction I thought video games were going in when they had all, you know, when the CD had started being used in game consoles like the Sega CD. And then when the PlayStation was announced, the first PlayStation, I thought that's how the games would be on the PlayStation. That most of them or half of them would be like video-based video games. So I was a little disappointed that they weren't, because I thought that was really cool. But, you know, I guess in hindsight, like they probably did go in a better direction than they would have with just using video. Anyway, the one cool thing I did get to do as a kid when I was around 12 or 13 or whatever is I got to go to CES. And this was back when CES was held in both Chicago and Las Vegas. It was the big video game thing, you know, like conference. Like this was before, I guess, E3 is the new one now or whatever. But yeah, CES was the big one for video games back then in like the 80s or 90s or whatever. And so we went to the one in Chicago because it was closer to where we live. I think we did like, it was like a family trip or something, or just a short like weekend trip, and I got to take one of my friends with me. And so, and at the time it wasn't open to the public. It was like just for businesses and stuff. So we didn't know that when we got there though. And we got to the hall and we tried to get in, and they're like, oh yeah, it's for business or whatever. And then, so my dad decided to like use his construction business, which was something he had just started, and decided to use that to get us in somehow. Like, oh yeah, we're business, blah, blah, blah. Which is, I don't know how, I guess they just didn't care or whatever, who knows, but somehow we got in. So here it is, like me and my friend, and we're like the only kids in this place. And it's just like booths and booths of like, video game stuff for vendors and companies and stuff. I think it might open to the public as well at some point, but I think it would have been like later, like a few days later or something. I don't remember. I was like 12, 13 at the time. But anyway, when we were there, it was just purely like vendors and stuff. So like, I remember like we had these like Japanese guys following us around, like watching us play these games and like taking notes and stuff like that. It was kind of funny. But yeah, that was interesting because we got to see a lot of really cool stuff that never got released. And that was like early 90s, it was like 92 or 91, 92, something like that. Yeah, a lot of cool stuff that never got released, as well as stuff that was being looked at and developed and stuff at the time that did get released. So yeah, it was kind of a cool thing to do. And then by high school, I just kind of stopped playing video games. Like I got interested in other things. I got interested in girls and filmmaking and like who knows what else, all kinds of stuff. So I kind of just stopped playing video games for whatever reason. I don't know why. I mean, the times are changing. The era was changing a bit. We had gone from these like cartridge-based systems to like the PlayStation. And I remember the PlayStation seemed really expensive at the time. And maybe it was only like $100 more than a Nintendo or a Genesis or whatever, but it seemed at the time like it was really expensive. I remember it being like, I thought it was like $500 or something. I don't know. It's really difficult to put this all together because I'm not looking at any like historical records or anything like online about this stuff, and I'm just trying to remember it from memory here. And I want to say that when we were at CES, we saw like a demo of the PlayStation, but that doesn't seem right because that seems like we would have like that came out a few years later. But I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe we did see a demo of the PlayStation. It's hard to remember, but I just remember thinking it was like $500 or $600 or something crazy like that. And we were like, that is insane. That's never going to sell. And I remember thinking it was going to be a flop because it was so expensive. Plus it was from Sony, and like we're like, Sony, like it's not Nintendo, it's not Sega. But yeah, like I said, I don't remember the timeline. I remember thinking it was expensive and that it was going to flop, and maybe we saw it at CES, maybe this was a few years later that I remember thinking this or seeing this, or I don't remember exactly what it was. I just remember seeing it, thinking it was expensive and thinking it was going to flop, and not being that interested in the games that I saw for it, like the games that were being previewed or whatever. And I just kind of, and I was entering high school at the time, and I was into other things, and I just kind of got out of it, and I didn't bother. That doesn't mean I didn't play some video games here or there. I did. Like, we rented, my girlfriend and I at the time rented an N64 once, and played some Zelda when that came out. I did buy a PlayStation when they dropped down to $99. I got kind of a little like motivation or whatever to like try and play video games again, and I was like, well, it's $100, and I had some money at the time. I was like 18, 19 or something at the time, and so I was like driving trucks and making some money, and I was like, all right, yeah, they're $100, so I'll buy that in a couple games or whatever. So I bought like Soul Reaver and Gran Turismo and Street Fighter 2 and stuff like that. And that was kind of cool. Like, played that a little bit, but not very much. I mean, just a little bit here and there, but I didn't beat any games. I didn't play them long enough to do anything like that. I wasn't that interested in it all that much. And I bought my girlfriend at the time a PS2, and then we broke up like a month or two later, so that was like $400 or whatever that I spent on that, and that was kind of crazy, but yeah. And then just things just kind of went on, and then I had a kid of my own, and I started buying him some like Nintendos, like some, you know, like GameCube, and played that a little bit, bought a couple games for myself. Again, never beat any games or anything like that, just played that a little bit. I also played a couple PC games here and there, like I had Fable that I got from my PC that I played a little bit, and I also had Grand Theft Auto 3 that I played a little bit on the PC. But again, like I never played any of these games all the way through or beat them or anything. And then we got a Wii, a used Wii, for my son a little bit later, and that was kind of fun. Played that a little bit, just mostly Wii Sports, and he played that a little bit. And then, yeah, and I met my current girlfriend, and she had an Xbox 360, or she got an Xbox 360, and she had a PS2 at the time as well. And then at some point we were living together, and I ended up renting, I think it was. Yeah, I think I rented I rented BioShock Infinite. And this was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. I rented BioShock Infinite for the Xbox 360, and I played it all the way through, and I beat it. And that was the first time I had played and beaten a video game in 15, 18 years, something like that, something crazy like that. Maybe less than that, maybe it was 12, 15 years, I don't remember. But yeah, it had been a long time since I had played a video game all the way through and beaten it, and I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then a few years later, I ended up getting a gift card from work for my job for being there for 10 years, and it was like a nice $800 gift card or whatever to Amazon, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna buy a PS4. I got interested, like I got a wild hair at my ass and got interested in trying video games again. I was like, yeah, why not? You know, they're like $300, and I got this gift card, and you know, there's a couple games that look kind of cool. So I ended up buying a PS4 Slim, and it came with Uncharted 4, and I'd never heard of Uncharted before. Never heard of the series, never played them, didn't know what it was about, wasn't sure about it, thought it kind of looked stupid. I was like, I don't know about this game. But I ended up playing it, and I ended up loving it. And I played it all the way through, and I beat it, and I loved it. And then I went back and I bought the Nathan Drake collection, 1 through 3, and I played those all the way through. It took me a few years because I still don't play video games that often, but I'll pick them up and I'll play them. Maybe it might be 2 or 3 months in between plays, or like lately I've been playing them more often. But yeah, I beat 1 through 3, and then I just finished. I also, at some point in there, I also picked up a few other games like GTA 5, and I picked up Horizon Zero Dawn, which I started playing but haven't finished yet. Nier Automata, I think that's how you say it, Nier Automata? That doesn't sound right. Yeah, but anyway, yeah. But that was, actually, we bought that for my son, so I played a little bit of it. He played a lot more of it than me, but it looked cool. It looked like a cool game. I'm just looking at my shelf over there. We get like, I don't know, like 12 or 15 games right now, but haven't played them all, like Titanfall, stuff like that. Like a lot of them, like I started playing a little bit, but I haven't played them all the way through. But I just finished Uncharted: The Lost Legacy the other night, Friday night, so it's Sunday right now, and I love that game. I love that whole series. I didn't, it's funny because first ordering a PS4 with Uncharted 4 coming with it, no idea what the game was, never heard of it, and then, it had been pretty much, for the most part, aside from like BioShock Infinite, it had been pretty much almost a 20-year hiatus there for me seriously playing video games. So I really didn't know what was going on in the video game industry, or like, what the big news is, what the big games are. Like, over the years I'd hear about different games like Call of Duty and stuff, and it just seemed like the whole video game industry turned into first-person shooters, and a lot of that's why I stayed out of it for a long time, because none of that really interested me very much. I'd see first-person shooters and I'd be like, I don't know, they don't really do much for me. Like, when I was younger, I remember Doom came out, and I had a shareware version of Doom on floppy disk, and I couldn't play it on the PC that we had because I didn't have enough RAM, which sucked. So I ended up giving the shareware version to my buddy or whatever. I was able to play Wolfenstein. This was back in like the mid-90s or something, when I was still playing video games. So those were like the first time I ever played first-person shooters was Wolfenstein and Doom. But yeah, I didn't really have a whole lot of interest in a lot of first-person shooters outside of playing and beating BioShock Infinite, which I liked a lot. So I really didn't know a whole lot about what kind of video games were out there, or what was going on. I mean, I thought most of them were first-person shooters and maybe like racing games and sports games and stuff. Like, I didn't realize like that there were these really cool like action-adventure games, like that were basically like playable movies, like the Uncharted games or the Tomb Raider games or whatever. So like, yeah, it's pretty cool to discover that genre of games, because now it's my favorite genre of games. So that was kind of accidental, and a happy accident for sure. So like I said, I've now finished all the Uncharted games, and actually today I just started Tomb Raider, the definitive edition. And I'm not liking it as much, to be honest. I'm not liking it as much as the Uncharted games. The game mechanics and stuff, I'm just, like, they're not bad or anything, they're just not, like, there's a lot of times where my controller's going all over this because it's like wiggle the joystick left and right. It's like I can't do that with my thumb. Like, it just can't do it fast enough. So I've got to like reach over with my other hand to do it, and then it's like do the paddles back and forth like with the triggers. Like, I'm like, this is retarded. Like, but yeah. So like, I don't like those game mechanics as much as I like the ones in the Uncharted games. I just think the game. But again, I played 5 Uncharted games at this point. The other thing is, as somebody who hasn't played video games in a long time, like, the auto-aiming functionality on, like, the last 2 Uncharted games was really nice. I mean, I know there's a lot of, like, younger people who grew up playing these first-person shooters with analog sticks and stuff, and they're used to aiming and shooting. Like, my son can do it, like, no problem. Like, that's just, like, he's been doing it his whole life since he was a kid, pretty much. Like, for me, though, when I first bought the PS4, I was like, I felt like an old guy, and I got used to it, especially playing the first 3 Uncharted games. I got used to it because they don't have the auto-aiming functionality, but I definitely prefer when a game does. and it doesn't look like Tomb Raider does. I don't know, I didn't dive into the options too much, but it doesn't look like at least the first Tomb Raider from 2013 does. I never played the old series of Tomb Raider games. I remember them, I just never played them. Never, I don't know why. Just they were all weird polygon shapes and just, I don't know, they didn't interest me back then. I think there was just this weird period of time with video games where, you know, the whole polygon 3D stuff came out and it was like so raw and it wasn't like, it didn't look good enough yet. And so like we'd gone from like the 8-bit graphics and stuff, which were kind of cartoony, to like this era of like just polygon mess, to the point now where you like got the PS4 and the Xbox One where they have actually good enough graphics that things, well, even I guess the PS3 and Xbox 360, where they have good enough graphics where, you know, the games are actually playable and they aren't just like a mess of, you know, polygons and stuff, but where it's all, you know, definitely looks like, it's more realistic looking these days, and I like that a lot more. So, but yeah, they are like playable movies, and that's the weird part, is like there's times where like they go to these cutscenes or these cinematic scenes or whatever, and it's like, and especially the Uncharted games, because they're like seamless, they cut between like the cinematics and I'm like, wow, like that's crazy, and there's times where it's just like, and just hit this button to punch and hit this button to dodge, and it's like, this is what is it? Like I came from playing like, you know, even the old school 8-bit games, there was a lot more interactivity to it going on. You move your characters around more. It wasn't just like wait to push a button and then push this other button when you're signaled. And then, so that's kind of weird, like during certain fight scenes in the Uncharted games, and you have to do that kind of stuff, or in the Tomb Raider game where you have to like, and you have to hit it at just the right time. And it's the only option, like there's no other options to do anything different, because it's like half cinematic, half gameplay kind of thing. That stuff's kind of weird to me. But, you know, I guess it helps to tell the story and stuff, and these games these days have really good stories. So yeah, that's kind of video games. Now I'm looking at the new game systems, you know, the PS5 and the Xbox Series X, and I'm looking at those systems now, and I'm kind of, you know, checking those out. It's first time in, you know, since like the era of like the SNES where I'm actually interested in, you know, new game systems, because I bought into the PS4 mid-generation or whatever, when the Slim came out, or like a few months after the Slim came out. So the cool thing about that though is that there was already a whole bunch of games that were out that were fun. So, you know, didn't have to like wait for a new system, like build up titles or anything. But yeah, now I'm looking at the new systems and I'm like, yeah, they look pretty cool, but I'm also like, I don't know, I'm not sure. Like, I'm not like 4K and stuff. It's like, like I don't care that much about 4K. Like, I mean, for me more than anything, it's going to come down to like how good the actual graphics in the game itself look. Like, I mean, if they wanted to give me a 1080p image with just better rendered assets, I would probably prefer that to just a 4K game at 60 frames per second. Like, I don't get what the whole 60 frame per second thing is either. Like, I guess that's more of a first person shooter thing, but like to me it's like in the video world, because I do video production. I know it doesn't look like it for my video here because I'm not putting any effort into this, but I've been doing video production for almost 15 years now, and I mean, in those scenarios, like, you want 24 frames a second, 30 max. Like, you want lower frame rates, not higher frame rates, because you want it to look more cinematic. But I guess with video games, it's more frame rates are better for action while you're moving around, because you can see things better and stuff. You can react faster and stuff. So I guess that makes sense, you know, 60 frames a second or even 120 or more, I guess. But for me, it's like, I don't really care that much about it. Like, I played, like I said, the Uncharted games and stuff at 30 frames a second. I loved them. Like, they were great. Like, I wouldn't have any, like, to me, it's like 60. I don't know. And I'd have to play it to see the difference. Like, but to me, they seemed fine, like perfectly fine at 30 frames a second or whatever they were. So, I mean, for me, it's more like just better looking games with HDR and like better textures and stuff. Like, just give me another Uncharted game, but like make all the characters and environments even more realistic, even if it's, you know, 1080p. Like, that's fine by me. And 30 frames a second, fine by me. I don't know if we're going to get that with the next gen. I'm sure they will look a little better, but it seems like, I don't know. I mean, the ray tracing part, I hear that sounds pretty cool. I'm not 100% sure what goes into that, but that does look pretty cool for lighting and stuff. But yeah, for me, it's more the prettiness of the game. Like, I love seeing all those wide vistas of like cool ancient ruins and stuff in the Uncharted games. And like, I mean, if the PS4 was the last system out, like, and they weren't going to make any more video game systems, I'd probably be perfectly fine with that, so long as they kept making games like that. Because as far as I'm concerned, like, they already look amazing. But then again, I'm a guy who came from, you know, the old 8-bit and 16-bit systems and pretty much jumped, almost leapfrogged everything else to get to where we are now. So, you know, that's my take on it. But yeah, that's pretty much my game history, and just jotting it down because my memory is not wonderful all the time, and it's only going to get worse as time goes on. So I figured I'd just put it in a video I can watch. Especially since I've had a couple of game accomplishments lately, like finishing, you know, The Lost Legacy, and, you know, starting Tomb Raider today. So I hope I like those games. I've got all 3 of them, and I've got God of War as well waiting for me at some point. And I still have to finish Horizon Zero Dawn, and you know, I still have to get more into GTA 5 either. I've barely played that. So yeah, I got some games to play still, so you know, I got some time before these new systems come out. I probably won't buy one this year anyway, or next year even, maybe. I'll probably wait a couple of years or whatever until they come out with like the first revision of those systems or something. You know, the smaller versions or whatever. That way, again, they'll have better games out by then, more games out by then. Then again, who knows? Who knows? But yeah, that's it. That's it for now. I'm done talking. I've talked way too long here. I'm like half an hour now, but this isn't for anybody else. If you're watching, thanks for watching. But that's on you. Don't blame me, because you just spent a half an hour listening to some guy on YouTube just babble on about video games and his history. That's on you. This is really more for me. But yeah, so that's it.